a Japanese temple complex in Nara, Japan, and it's called Todai-ji. And you're seeing two out of the three, actually four images associated with this particular temple complex. Um, Context-wise, again, we're labeling this as a Buddhist temple complex. And Buddhism is introduced to Japan through the Silk Road. And a Korean king who basically gave the Japanese emperor a bronze statue of Buddha and a copy of the Buddha's writings. And during this time period in Japan, a lot of things had like disasters and um, bad things had been happening, like disease and so on. So I think the Japanese emperor really embraced Buddhism and thought if he sponsored a great building of monasteries and convents and temple complexes in every province of Japan, and not only that, got every kind of citizen in Japan to pay taxes for it or to contribute in some way to the process and the buildings, that the Buddha would protect Japan from further disasters, since so many things had been going wrong. So I think that's part of like why um, this complex was built and why Buddhism was so embraced by the emperor at the time. And really, this building became a symbol of, and Buddhism became a symbol of national unity, spiritual unity, and such a important kind of symbolic complex here in Japan at this time. And unfortunately, a civil war happened in 1180, and the original Tadaji Buddhist temple complex burned down. And it was rebuilt because it was such an important place, such a symbolic place, a spiritual place, that it was rebuilt by kind of what's called a shogun. So there's the emperor, and then there was a shogun who was a dominant warlord, kind of very military based leader who had political power, and the emperor was kind of more of a figurehead. And so the shogun leader sponsored the rebuilding of it. And during the rebuild, there was a sculptural school called the Kai School of Sculpture, which was founded after the Civil War because of this great need for rebuilding across Japan. And their particular sculptural style, which you'll see in a later piece, was known for really active, vibrant, muscular figures and more realism than your typical sculptures in Japan. And then the other thing that happened because of the need for rebuild was the requirement of wood, because a lot of the buildings are made of wood. It's a essential material, especially for religious structures, that connection to the natural, organic, spiritual world of nature. And it was really hard to find. They would typically use cypress because it's strong, and um, they had to look all over Japan and retrieve most of the cypress trees from all over Japan just to rebuild the complex. So we're going to take content kind of image by image. So this is one of the College Board images. It is the Great Buddha Hall, and its purpose was really to house the statue of the Buddha Vairocana Buddha, which is the primordial Buddha who basically rules over all other Buddha figures. And this is the building made of cypress wood. And you'll notice in this building and in the gate that it's two-tiered here, multiple layers, and the roof line on the ends really curve upwards. And so the vocab term, when you have that, like a multiple layered structure, and especially with the roof line curving upward, it's called a pagoda. And so you can definitely use that terminology here. So again, purpose here is to house the sculpture of the Buddha, and this is the great Buddha. The Buddha itself is made of bronze, and in fact, it's the largest, I think, Buddha sculpture, metal Buddha sculpture in Japan. And to make it, they had to make it with all the available copper that they could find in Japan, and then mix that with charcoal, and that's how they made the bronze here. So he's sitting in lotus position. He has his hands outspread. You can see one of them there. And when you have a symbolic hand gesture, and we could have even used this term in many ways with Jesus when he does the judge and blessing symbol. That symbolic hand gesture is a mudra. And here it's like a teaching mudra, means do not fear and welcome. When the sculpture was done, the emperor attended something called the eye opening ceremony, and the eyes of the Buddha were painted on, which you can kind of see a little bit of the whites with the pupils. And that eye opening ceremony is the factor that gives the Buddha a sense of life. And that, again, was attended by a lot of important officials, including the emperor, with this. And the shape of him, the way he looks is definitely inspired by Buddha sculptures in China, which we'll probably be talking about more specifically when we look at some of our Buddhas from China itself. So that will make more sense later on. And he is ritually cleaned every year, that sense of renewal every year for him. And it's just a peaceful, wise, welcoming spiritual symbol that relates to, I think, the emperor and his power, and also the power of Japan to have this great symbol and this large sculpture of the Buddha, the largest in Japan, here at this site. Now, the gate here was built in the 12th century. It was influenced by the emperor's trips to China, seeing the structures there. Again, it has that two-tiered roof. Pagodas mostly are multiple layers, even it could be 9, 10 layers. What's interesting here, and it's unusual in Japan, but I think more common in China, is have the two layers be the same width. Typically in pagodas, and in Japan in particular, you'll have the ascending layers be more narrow. So that's something you see here that's a bit unusual. It's made completely of wood. Again, you could use the term pagoda here, that raised, curved roofline for sure. There were, in this particular gate that kind of leads you into the sacred space, you have two large wooden sculptures of guardian figures, and that's going to be our next image. And those guardian figures were done by the Kai School of Sculpture. So they are so cool. Here are the guardians, and again, both made of wood, made by the Kai School, and then they do give you two different artists' names, Unkai and I think it's KK or Kiki, I'm not too sure. But they were the specific artists. It would be good to know them because they are listed out in your College Board identification list. It's probably a good idea. They're made in what's called the joint block technique, where you take 8 to 9 pieces of wood block, carve them and attach them together. And then you have an outer layer of wood attached to all those foundational wood blocks. And then you paint those outer ones and attach those together. So it is, I think, more importantly than not, because they're not really going to ask you too much about how it's put together, but they're muscular, they're energetic, active. They are, this great exaggerated contrapposto with exaggerated poses. To me, they look a lot like Hellenistic sculpture in Greece in terms of the energy and action and movement in the body, the drama of, that protective, forceful figure. And we believe because these were made during the times of the shogun, renewing and, refurbishing and rebuilding a lot of the Buddhist temple complex, that these sculptures, which were done at that time, represented that shogun military-based leadership in Japan. So I think that would definitely fits just the look. They're just fabulous. So with this Buddhist complex then, I think function definitely is a sacred space because of the Buddha and because of the different buildings and complex here being so focused on religion. honoring Buddha, definitely that. But almost an equal amount of function would be power, because the complex in the Buddha is also a link to and showing the power of the emperor. So you could put that as well. Religion, ritual with the cleaning and the eye-opening ceremony for the Buddha, you could say that as well. And again, remember that part is the temple shows this emerging importance of Buddhism and the link of Buddhism with politics, as our politicians, be it an emperor or a shogun, is linking themselves to Buddha in order to express their own power. Formal qualities, you could do proportion, because everything here is such large scale and it's helping express that power of Buddha and the power of the emperor. That would probably be sufficient to do proportion, because the Todai-ji was the largest wooden structure in Japan when it was built. It was incredibly large, using up most of the cypress in Japan. So that proportion and size has to be meaningful for sure. So again, that is in Japan, in Nara, Japan, and it is the Todai-ji Buddhist temple complex.